All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most wild, totally rule-breaking training methods in anime history. I mean, we're talking about the ultimate Shinigami cheat code. Plus, we're going to unpack that massive fandom debate surrounding the incredibly controversial guy who actually invented it. Let's get into it.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll hit the Bankai shortcut, then look at 3 Days of Hell, uncover the hidden architect, debate fraud or genius, and wrap up with intellect over brawn. Okay, let's jump right in.
Section 1. The Bankai shortcut. We're dropping right into the middle of the Ryoka invasion. The stakes? Absolutely life or death for Rukia Kuchiki. Her execution date just got bumped up, and time has officially run out. Now, to really set the stage, we gotta talk about Bankai. It's the ultimate Shinigami technique, right? A power multiplier so ridiculously huge, usually 5 to 10 times stronger than your base weapon, that basically every captain is required to have it. But here's the catch. Historically, it demands at least a decade of non-stop, intense training to fully master. It's literally like trying to cram a 10-year PhD program into a single, high-stress long weekend. When you compare the two methods, it really highlights just how impossible Ichigo's task actually is. On one side, you have the traditional route, 10 long years of peaceful internal meditation just to sync up with your sword spirit. But on the flip side, the Urahara method, 3 days of brutal, externalized physical submission. Ichigo has to squeeze an entire decade of mastery into just 72 hours if he wants any chance of saving Rukia. So, what's the secret to this incredibly dangerous shortcut? It all comes down to an artifact called the Tenshintai. It's actually a super vital top-secret tool from the covert ops forces. Basically, you stab your Zanpakuto into this thing, and it forcefully yanks the sword's spirit out into the physical world. Boom! No more sitting and meditating, you are going straight into a brutal trial by combat. Which brings us to Section 2, 3 Days of Hell. Let's look at the actual training process, because the 72-hour constraint, it acts as a suffocating, literal ticking time bomb for Ichigo's survival. The timeline here is just grueling. On August 5th, Yoruichi fires up the Tenshintai, and Zangetsu is pulled into the real world. Then, literally the very next day, August 6th, Renji crashes this top-secret training session to try and unlock his own Bankai because, surprise, Rukia's execution got moved up yet again. That leaves August 7th as the absolute drop-dead deadline, and Ichigo actually manages to master it right as the execution ceremony kicks off. 52. I really want you to think about that number. That is the exact number of replica swords Zangetsu absolutely shattered during their clashes. It perfectly highlights the intense trial and error involved here. Ichigo couldn't just rely on Zangetsu's raw strength anymore. He had to break his old habits, adapt on the fly, and learn to match his opponent's speed using pure instinct. The steps sound easy enough on paper, but they are terrifying in practice. Step 1, externalize the spirit. Step 2, find the one true blade hidden among dozens of fakes. Step 3, force the spirit into submission before the clock runs out. But what if you fail? What if that timer hits 0? Well, the consequences are heavily implied to be completely fatal. We're talking about shattering the Shinigami's very soul. All right, Section 3, the hidden architect. Since Ichigo somehow manages to pull off the impossible right at the buzzer, it really makes you wonder about the origins of this incredibly reckless method. I mean, we really have to pivot and ask, who in the world is the mastermind capable of inventing a technique that just completely breaks the fundamental laws of soul society? Like, who else could have actually survived using this 3-day cheat code? Well, surprise! It's revealed that Kisuge Urahara, the goofy guy running the candy shop in the human world, is actually a legendary Shinigami scientist. We find out he's the former captain of the 12th Division and the literal founder of the Shinigami Research Institute. Oh, and those massive underground training grounds Ichigo used? Yeah, Urahara secretly built those himself. But Urahara's genius isn't just about building a cool artifact. He actually used this exact method to achieve his own Bankai in exactly 3 days. And here's the kicker. He mathematically calculated the absolute breaking point of a Shinigami's soul. He's the one who figured out that pushing this process even a minute past 3 days would literally destroy the user. And that leads us perfectly into Section 4, fraud or genius.
Knowing how insanely smart he is sparks a really fascinating ongoing meta-debate in the fandom about Urahara's actual combat power.
So let's play neutral referee for a second and look at the community's deep dives. On one side of the debate, some fans focus on his anti-feats, like how he struggled early on against certain opponents or how he actively avoids getting into fights. But then, on the other side, defenders are quick to point out his high-end feats. I mean, the guy successfully landed hits on a Chrysalis stage Aizen and completely outsmarted elite Schutzstaffel members. That is absolutely no joke.
The big question is, how do fans rationalize these massive power discrepancies? Well, argument A leans heavily on his Gigai. For a huge chunk of the early story, Urahara is hanging out in an artificial human body that actively suppresses his spiritual pressure. He's basically wearing heavy weights. On the flip side, argument B is a bit more cynical. Some fans just argue that his physical power fluctuates based purely on whatever the narrative demands at that exact moment.
But here's a really interesting take from a fan analysis. He's a huge scaredy cat. He despises fighting and goes out of his way to not fight because of his underlying fear of death. Looking at the source material impartially, this perspective is super compelling. It suggests those so-called anti-feats aren't him being weak, they're just incredibly consistent character traits. At his core, Urahara is a scientist who hates fighting. He's hyper-aware of his own mortality, which makes him act extremely cautious, almost to the point of paranoia.
Which brings us to our final section, intellect over brawn. Let's pull all these contrasting ideas together and see what Urahara's strength is really all about and how he actually fits into the power scaling of this universe.
Another piece of fan analysis hit the nail on the head, saying, Urahara is a method actor and behaves like he needs to in a given situation. I absolutely love this framing. He isn't some raw, brute force brawler. He's a tactical chameleon. He exerts the exact minimum effort required to survive, observe the enemy, and gather data. For him, power isn't about flexing massive spiritual pressure, it's about strictly controlling the entire flow of the situation.
Really, his true power rests on a few specific pillars. We're talking supreme intellect, elite mastery of high-level keto spells like Hado 91, and a seemingly bottomless bag of crazy innovative gadgets. Guys, even Sosuke Aizen admitted Urahara's intellect was the only one that actually surpassed his own. Urahara's power scaling doesn't rely on gym stats, it relies entirely on science, insane preparation, and having a lethal built-in countermeasure for literally everything.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. In a universe filled with world-shattering swords and giant energy blasts, does masterminding the battle before it even starts make you the strongest, or just the smartest? Think about that the next time you see Urahara Kisuke whip out his fan. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this deep dive. Keep learning and stay focused.